every day is a new day. You never know what you're gonna find.
Hey everyone, I'm Chase, founder of Oak & Oscar, and I've always loved the stories behind watches and the people who own them and why. Welcome to the next episode of The Watch Table. We're here today with Justin, also known as Watch Steez on Instagram, to talk with him about his watches and why he loves them. I've traveled the country with Justin in pursuit of watches and can honestly say I've never met a person so focused on finding the right example of a watch. Some call him the King of Gallet, few realize he's an avid skateboarder, but everyone knows his collection is amazing. Let's learn more about the story behind the watch. Justin, welcome to the Watch Table.
Thank you, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, it's totally my pleasure. So, why do you love watches?
I think I've always been around watches. My family is in the jewelry business. They own a jewelry store. My great-grandfather was a master watchmaker, so I've kind of always, grown up around jewelry, watches, and things. It wasn't until probably about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 7, I inherited my great-grandfather's vintage universal pole router. That kind of got me hooked on vintage watches and kind of went down a rabbit hole with those.
So you've loved watches since you were a little kid.
Yeah, I've always been into watches. I remember as a kid, my first day at going to kindergarten, I was wearing my digital G.I. Joe watch, and I just, I really connected with it, and I collected G.I. Joes as a kid, played with G.I. Joes, and so this was my kind of daily watch as a young child.
I think what's crazy is that you actually still have it. And what's crazy more is that the sounds work and it's not necessarily beat up. So you were pretty much watched these from like day one.
I kept a lot of the original figures in their boxes, so I guess that lends credit to, keeping everything with the watches, keeping them, in really nice original condition, and I've always been that way as a collector of everything, so. It
brings the question up, what was your first real watch?
Yeah, so my first real watch, I would consider this Casio quartz two-tone, and I say real watch because it actually looks like a normal watch,
Sure.
It's not like a G.I. Joe camouflage plastic piece, but this I bought, I think when I was about 14 years old. It was on a shopping trip with my family, and I bought it at Sears of all places. I got 25% off. I was really excited about it, and I found it probably 7-8 years ago with the original box, paperwork, receipt, extra links, everything still with the watch, so I'm happy I kept it all these years.
Wow, so tell me about where your watch passion went from that.
As I said, I've always been into watches, but I started out with modern watches. When I inherited the universal pole router from my great-grandfather, that flipped the script.
Oh.
I went entirely vintage. My collection kind of shifted entirely from modern to almost entirely vintage from there.
Wow.
So
that's really cool to have that obvious switch up. That's cool. And then let's talk about the watch that's on your wrist.
Yeah, so this is a Wittnauer alarm watch, and it's not your average alarm watch. It's got a very unique movement in it. The alarm actually winds and sets by rotating the external bezel.
Oh, wow.
So when you look at this watch, it looks like the bezel's just cool, it's stepped, it kind of looks integrated to the case.
It looks fixed.
Yeah, but you can turn the bezel and winds the alarm at the same time. So you would set the alarm hand to wherever you want it to sound, and when the time gets there, there's a ringing sound. And the numerals on the dial, from a design standpoint, are pretty unique.
When you get up close to it, the numerals really strike as numerals.
Yep.
But when you're further away from it, they just look like really great little applied triangles. So let's move outside of watches. What kind of hobbies do you have other than collecting watches?
So I've been skateboarding since I was probably 8 or 10 years old. I'm not as serious as I was, when I was 16, but I'm still doing it now, and I have a lot of fun with it. Big sports fan. I follow most of the New England teams, Patriots, Celtics. I'm from Milwaukee, but I do have some family ties in the Northeast, so near Foxborough where the Patriots play, but I've always been a fan my whole life, and it's like a full-time job following the Pats. So.
So let's talk about the watches on the table.
I'd start with this Mito Power Wind Exotic Diver. I think it goes back to, again, kind of a childhood memory of mine. I always was a fan of Dr. Seuss books growing up, so you'll recognize kind of the rainbow dial on it in the pastel colors. It's kind of like the book, Oh, the Places You Will Go. That looks identical to the cover on the book, and I just always related with the characters and the stories and the colors. And I think, after about a year of searching, one popped up for sale from an Instagram collector of all people, and I ended up acquiring it, and here it is today. So one of my favorite watches here, and probably my favorite watch to wear, is a Gallet Multichron 45M decimal. This watch is really important to me because the decimal model in general was my very first Gallet, and I am obsessed with Gallet, as many people know. It's a larger size, it's got pump pushers, waterproof case, and it's my favorite case design ever made from any company.
Now talk about this pretty little yachting guy here.
So that is a Leisure Yachting graph. What's special about it though is it's double signed on the dial by O'Day Sailboat Company. Only way you could get this watch was by buying a 1971 O'Day sailboat, redeeming an ad in a magazine with your purchase voucher, and then they would send you this watch.
I love the fact that you were able to do some research on it, and through an ad in a magazine in the 70s, you learned more about it. About how maybe 1, 2, 10, who knows how many people bought that boat, sent in the ad, and got a watch. That's really cool. That's great. So when you're looking for a watch, or when you want to acquire a watch, what are some of the things you look for?
First and foremost, design. I have to buy a watch that I love. I don't really care necessarily what brand it is. It's all about how the watch looks and kind of wears on my wrist, and if it speaks to me. Maybe it has a unique function, or it was designed for an intended purpose. And then I also like the rarity factor. So if you can get a watch that you're not going to run into someone else with that same watch, that's appealing to me.
How have watches affected your life?
I think watches have changed my entire life.
Sure.
I mean, I think you've also gone through a similar, scenario where you meet people, on Instagram, and that become lifelong friends, and all of a sudden one thing leads to another, and this becomes your job. So.
Yeah, and speaking of, you actually quit your day job as an accountant to do watches full time. It's been really fun to see that change, and I know the freedom that you get from it. It's really fun to be able to share that with someone else in a similar pattern.
Every day is a new day. You never know what you're going to find. A new watch turns up, and you get excited about it, and then you're on to the next one.
Are there any pieces here that you just really lusted after and then you finally found them?
This Movado M95 subsea chronograph with a Panda tachometer dial. This was one that it kind of hit me out of nowhere. A good friend of mine in Milwaukee had one of these, and he showed it to me, and I was immediately in love. I mean, it's 35 millimeter case, 18 millimeter lug width. So this piece, it just wears so well. I knew the first time I handled one that I had to have it.
And then let's talk about this guy.
This is a JP Penguin Cruise Master, and what I love about it is A, this is the only one I've ever seen.
It's totally unique.
And B, it's got 2 bezels on it. So the outer bezel sets the tide percentage. So you would own this watch if you live near a beach or a high tide risk zone. Maybe a sailor or a yachtsman would have owned this watch. And then the inner silver bezel, it can track a second time zone. It's just really unique. I mean, when you turn the inner bezel, you can hear the sand just gritting in it. So this watch, I think, spent its entire life probably, someone owned it on a beach or near a beach, and they needed to know the tides. It's just really cool. I have no interest in cleaning that bezel to turn smoothly. You can hear it kind of gritting a little bit. So.
That's fun. It's fun. I've actually never seen that watch before. I didn't even know you had it.
So this is a Tissot Navigator. It was introduced in 1951. What it was designed to do was to track several time zones at any given time instantaneously. So this watch, it came out before the Rolex GMT Master. It was specifically designed for people that traveled frequently across time zones. The interesting thing about it that no other watch has is the external bezel is fixed. So the external bezel has numbers 1 through 12. That's where you actually tell the time on, your local time. So the hour hands, you're looking at the bezel to determine the time. But the hands, they rotate once every 12 hours like any other watch.
Sure.
There's a center disc though that rotates once every 24 hours. Oh. So the two rotate differently, they're geared differently so that you can read the time instantly on any of these major cities in comparison to your local time. It's just one of the coolest watches I've ever seen.
So how about this one, the Volcana?
So the Volcana Cricket, its name, Cricket, comes from the sound that it makes when the alarm goes off. It's kind of a buzzing sound. Very famous model. It was worn by several US presidents. It's actually their motto or their tagline is Volcana, a watch for presidents, something like that. Radium dial, radium hands. This thing will light up a Geiger counter for sure. It's a really, really rare watch, special piece in my collection.
There's something really, a nice romantic notion of having that on your wrist and feeling the buzz. And I have an old Russian alarm watch from Polyot that, believe it or not, kind of works.
Yeah, you showed me that one. That's a cool watch.
Yeah.
And the alarms in general are really cool. So one of these pieces that I'd like to take with me when I travel, wherever I go, is the Okanasker Sanford GMT. What I love about it is, obviously it's rugged, it can take a beating, it's modern, but I can wear it, anywhere. I know it's water resistant, I know it's gonna stand up to shock and all that kind of thing, so I don't need to worry about as much as when I wear like an old vintage piece. Like I said, it's a GMT, so I take it wherever I travel.
Yeah, and I know you sent me photos of wearing that watch in Greece and
yep.
Italy, I believe, as well.
Yep, I brought it to Italy, brought it to Greece. It's been all over the world with me, and so I just like the versatility of it, and obviously the reliability of a modern piece that you can't really get with a vintage piece. All of these watches, as I mentioned, they really speak to me personally. I think, if you could put together, a group of watches that define kind of who I am and what my interests are, this would be the pile here. So all of them are kind of equally important to me, and, each one has its own story.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think that's one thing that's amazing about watches. When you lay out the collection, sometimes you learn a little bit more about yourself than you realize, which I think is always nice to have that kind of perspective sometimes. So let's talk about the latest one in your collection, the Jackson.
Being a vintage guy, I love the manual winding chronographs, and to have a modern manual winding chronograph with a flyback is just, in my opinion, something that not a lot of companies are doing, especially at this price point. I also love the fact that it's a 2-register model, but it has 12-hour recording capability. So a lot of my 3-register chronographs that I have, they can record 12 hours, but they've got that third sub-register that is a little bit more busy. I tend to favor 2-register models,
yep.
And this one, it has 2 registers, but it does everything that a 3-register can do.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head, because having the 2 registers, but still the same data as 3 registers, and that's something that we're really proud to be able to accomplish using that Eterna movement.
Yeah, this is an incredible piece, and I just love how easy it is to wear. The pushers are just silky smooth.
Well, I'm honored. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you definitely paid attention to detail with that one, so that's
well, thank you.
Incredible piece.
All right, now it's time for the rapid fire questions. You saw with Nick what we did. We're gonna do it here as well. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What's your favorite complication?
Chronograph.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Flying.
Okay. If who'd win in a fight, Bill Belichick or Tony Hawk?
Oh boy. Although I think Tony Hawk is the greatest skateboarder of all time, Bill Belichick wins this fight easily. I picture him like Jedi mind tricking Tony Hawk and somehow, just making it happen. Underdog.
Okay. What's your favorite swear word? If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Back to my roots, I'd go to Greece.
Okay. Now, we'll give you an opportunity as well. How many straps are in the container?
300 straps are in the container.
Okay. Official. 300.
Exactly 300.
Exactly. All right. Well, with that, I say thank you very much for coming out to the watch table. It's very much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.